With respect to Roy Keane, who I very much like as a pundit and very much like as a player, that might explain why he's no longer a manager, because that sort of attitude is entirely wrong. Welcome to this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing, and of course, more importantly, keep leaving those brilliant questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this week's show. Observation that somehow Cristiano Ronaldo is being disrespected by Manchester United by Roy Keane. Look, this comes from somebody that when his time at Manchester United was up, like everybody's time is up in life, he felt that because he didn't get precisely what he wanted, he was disrespected. Sometimes circumstances are just not what people want. Ronaldo hasn't always been the most respectful. He's spoken at times about the culture inside Manchester United and the fact that people don't seem to want to listen to him, and he did when he was younger. I think he probably rewrites history a little bit there, but let's not argue with the particulars of that because we weren't there. But the argument that he's been disrespected, what, because he wasn't allowed to do precisely what he wanted? Because Manchester United brought him back and it's hard yards, and Manchester United is a football club that needs all of its forces pulling together, and Cristiano Ronaldo not being able to do precisely what he wants, when he wants, in some parallel universe where Roy Keane dwells, is disrespect. I don't know why that's disrespect. I don't know why it's the precinct of a footballer that signs a contract to be paid an inordinate amount of money is somehow, when he's asked to adhere to that contract, disrespected if he doesn't get precisely what he wants. With respect to Roy Keane, who I very much like as a pundit and very much like as a player, that might explain why he's no longer a manager, because that sort of attitude is entirely wrong. It's not an ideal situation. It's not a situation that you would want arguably one of the world's greatest players to be part of in the sort of twilight years of his career, but he's part of a team. The team is not very good. The manager's finding his feet. The manager wanted the player to stay, and that's the end of the discussion. Now, whether he should have played yesterday in that shower that turned out against Manchester City, or whether he should have been allowed to go, it doesn't come down to disrespect. It comes down to contractual obligations. If they were doing things that were prohibiting him on the basis of something they weren't entitled to do, then that could be considered perhaps commercially unfair. But that doesn't exist in this situation. The fella signed a contract. Manchester United are in decline. He's part of the solution to some extent. Get on with it. So I don't in any shape or form concur with Roy Keane, not because it's formulaic, because the players over here and everyone else over there, but because it's straightforward common sense. You're supposed to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Look, I mean, we have seen the decline of Manchester United over the last 9 years, not because of the decline of them economically, but because of the decline of them from a management point of view. Chelsea won the Champions League 18 months ago, or a little bit less than that. Liverpool are hitting a bit of a funk at this moment in time. Have got to find their way through this, and whether that's a formula that Klopp has seen in previous incarnations where he's burnt teams out and had to rebuild them is a different discussion. But right now, Manchester City and strangely Arsenal are the two best sides in the league. Not strangely because I have any disrespect for Arsenal, but their evolution is quicker at this moment in time than I expected, and they're doing wonderfully well, and they should be given praise for it. But I don't think you compare it to the Bundesliga. I mean, at this moment in time, I don't think Bayern Munich are top of the Bundesliga, so I'm not sure what argument that is. But the argument that Man City have got the best coach, the best group of players, and are playing the best football is unarguable. The notion that the Premier League sits still and waits and allows people to disappear over the horizon has never historically been true. So I have no reason to believe that it's going to be true with Man City. Guardiola won't be there forever. This group of players will change. Evolution will come. Of course, they've got this abundance of wealth, so they can bridge that gap and never have the consequences of ultimately a depreciation in financial power, but neither have Manchester United. It's all about the management structure that you put in. At this moment in time, they've got the best coach in the dugout, and they've bought the best in class everywhere else. If they continue to do that, it's going to be difficult for Man City to not continue to be an irresistible force. But the Premier League is an immovable object, and ultimately what you see is teams raise their game. Liverpool raised their game a couple of seasons ago and were the team that caught Man City. And I think there is a time and a place where Manchester United will get themselves together in the next half a decade. Chelsea, with the new ownership structure, will get themselves together. What Tottenham will become, we will see. Arsenal are in the groove. So I don't see it being, for want of a better expression, comparable to the Bundesliga, because I just think that the Premier League is so unique that it's thrown out so many different sides that have competed over the years that have made it such a compelling proposition. Hence the reasons why it's the most powerful and economically powerful league, that I don't think Man City will dominate. They're just in a rich vein of form. Win a Champions League, then we can talk about domination. But irrespective of that, let's be clear. Man City are in a irresistible vein of form, to use the word irresistible again. But it does help when you're playing against an inept Manchester United. Jurgen Klopp is an outstanding manager. I don't always concur with his views, as apparently he doesn't always concur with mine. But right now, the team are in a transition phase, and people are attributing statuses of great influence to people like Jordan Henderson, and when he's not there or not playing very well, the team is diminished. People are losing the argument or winning the argument about what Trent Alexander-Arnold may well be. Salah isn't at it. Núñez hasn't hit his straps yet. Virgil van Dijk may be coming to an end of a cycle. All of these questions have to be answered by elite managers. One of the things that Ferguson did over a significant period of time was keep refreshing and rebuilding. Now the landscape's changed. So the United team had less challenges at that time. They didn't have no challenges. They had Arsenal and other sides that were giving them a headache at times. But this league, with Manchester City and Manchester United, albeit in a strange guise, and Arsenal and Tottenham and Chelsea and whoever else we want to throw in the mix, and maybe some point down the future, Newcastle, will keep on throwing out an evolution. Jurgen Klopp would be a loss to the Premier League. I do tire sometimes of his myopic one-dimensional views about how the world should be structured for the benefit of Liverpool. But I guess that's his job. That's what his job is to do, is to promote and patronise and constantly put forward Liverpool's point of view. I think Liverpool will find their feet again, and regain their poise. But right now they're off balance, and I don't think that leads to a conversation that involves Klopp departing. It must lead to a conversation where Klopp revitalises, re-energises and recalibrates Liverpool back to where they were 2-3 years ago. Because right now, for whatever reason, they don't seem to be there, and it may simply be because he's exhausted these players of what they're capable of doing at the intensity he wants to play, and he needs to, change the balance. And I don't see what that alternate challenge would be. Would it be going to Real Madrid or Barcelona? I suppose you could say that's a trajectory that he'd go on. But the Premier League is where they want to be, most of them, because of the opportunities of the economics and the value and the players that they can sign. And I know that PSG will have an argument, and so will the Spanish teams. But I'd like to think that Klopp is like Doctor Who. He might just regenerate. I said last summer that there's no parallel universe where you'd give Gareth Southgate a top 6 manager's job. You'd never give him a top 6 manager's job over Roberto Mancini. If you compare them, they're like night and day in terms of tactical nous, ability to change, and a variety of other things. I think that he would be very lucky, and people will think this is some sort of preordained bias again, but I think he'd be very lucky to get a Premier League job, because I don't think being an international manager resembles anything like being a domestic manager. I think sometimes being a manager is the emperor's new clothes, but that might be the cynical former owner in me. But I think he would struggle in this country to get a top flight domestic job. Some people say how ridiculous, it's preposterous. He's just managed the England team to a World Cup semi-final and a European Championship final. Yes, by beating teams that they should beat, and then losing to teams that maybe are more challenging for them. And when we look at it and say losing a World Cup semi-final to Croatia is something that we'd say, well, that was just what it was, or losing a European Championship final to Italy in a virtual home tournament are things that we should laud and applaud. I think there are opportunities that were missed, and of course they'll say, well, look at the backstory. Look what all the other previous managers did. Well, yes, true, but we're judging Southgate by Southgate. So I don't think, in my view, he gets a Premier League manager's job. Then what does he do? Does he go managing the Championship? I don't think so. So you probably find him back in the confines of some framework where he could become a director of football, something like that. But I don't see him as a frontline Premier League manager. I don't see him want to manage in the Championship. I see him potentially, if the World Cup isn't successful, coming out and re-engaging with the establishment in some way. By that I mean the FA, because he's an FA man. Maybe he becomes the first footballer FA chief executive or chairman. Something like that I can see for Southgate. I think it's difficult for Conor. My main feeling for Conor, and speaking to his trainer Tony Sims last week, is that no damage gets done to him, in terms of it doesn't happen to him what happened to Kell Brook with Gennady Golovkin. And I said it to Conor, I think this is a bad fight for you. You stepped up, Kell Brook stepped up because they couldn't sell him and economically power him, so they put him in against Gennady Golovkin. He got done, broke his orbital bone, goes to the next fight, loses his world title. Now I know that Gennady Golovkin, Chris Eubank Jr. is not Gennady Golovkin, but neither is Conor Benn Kell Brook at this stage in his career. So I worry there's damage there, but I think Tony Sims won't let that happen. But I just think that if Eubank, and given the dynamic of the fight, all that's the background, because it isn't about these two fighters. These two fighters getting £8 million between them for a domestic fight at a catch weight with no titles on it is simply about hype. And the hype comes from their fathers. And the legacy and the pressure and all the expectation will probably drive Eubank into a position where his abilities will shine, because he's the more experienced, bigger fighter, and I expect him to win. I don't know how. I don't know whether it goes 12 rounds or whether it gets taken out early. What I do know is it's an intriguing fight, and I do hope that Conor Benn wins, but most importantly, I do hope that the paying public get a proper fight, because there's a lot of hype, a lot of interest, a lot of cost implications behind either going to the live event or watching it on pay-per-view. And I hope everyone gets their value for money, because last week, week before last, we saw a proper grown-up heavyweight fight between Joe Joyce and Joseph Parker, with meaning, menace, and value attached to it. And I hope we see something similar on Saturday, and both fighters come out with credibility and credit. If Conor Benn wins, fantastic. Chris Eubank will disappear into the ether. If Chris Eubank wins, as I think he will, it'll be interesting to see what he does next. Right, that's it for this week's edition of 1-to-1 with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to let me know your views on Roy Keane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Jurgen Klopp, and of course Conor Benn and Chris Eubank. Keep liking and subscribing, and keep leaving those valuable questions in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you next week.